Hello and welcome to our 10 years anniversary series of our HPCC Systems open source initiative. In this episode, I am really happy to have here two people that have been part of this community for a very long time. They have been involved in so many things, particularly ECL, ECL ID, ECL Watch. And as soon as I name them, you'll know who they are. So we have here Ken Rowland, and we have also Krishna Turlapathi. Both are, as I said before, quite core to our community. They've been quite active and they have been involved in a number of projects um, all across the board. So first of all, thank you very much, Ken and Krishna, for being here.
You're welcome.
So let's start randomly with Ken. So Ken, when did you start getting involved with HPC systems? How did you get involved and when was that?
Well, I first started getting involved. I joined LexisNexis really as a contractor working on ECL with Krishna back then. Um, fixing some bugs, adding some features. One of the primary features I did add was some geo-fencing um, that would allow checking of events to see if they're in city limits, outside of city limits, different county and state areas. So that was my first introduction. ECL was an interesting language to begin with because
Sorry, you said, sorry to interrupt you, but you said geofencing, and that quickly took me away from the specific conversation and into some of these artificial models that we sometimes build to do fencing. This is what some people call spherical cows, where you just define circles or squares, and states don't look like squares. Or, so
oh yeah,
I don't
there,
know
there
how.
was there was parts like that too to see if things were in within radiuses. Interesting, it had to take into account how latitudes and longitudes changed as it went up and down
Very
the
true.
Earth. You know, But so I learned ECL and learned the differences, and as you start talking about big data, query languages, and it's a little bit different world from the standard relational database stuff that I'd done in the past.
Very good. And Krishna, so how did you get involved?
Oh, now I feel old. I started getting involved with ECL when we were doing, my first thing was Moxie to ROXIE migration.
You're bringing so many
Oh, yeah.
memories. Yes,
That was when I actually started working on ECL on the ROXIE platform when it was still in the infant stage. Right? Then we migrated to ROXIE. Then for a long time, 702 platform was the most stable platform we had on ROXIE. And
702, and just for the audience, that is a version before even HPC became open source. So that was our long-lasting non-open source version, which was long-lasting because we spent quite a bit of time converting code and preparing it to make it open source. So eventually we migrated to the first open source version that was ready,
yeah.
uh, but it was quite a bit later.
Yeah, so then after that, it was the open source version and it just continued.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So you, and now back to Krishna then. So you had a very long history with HPCC systems, far before it became open source. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts and your experience as HPCC was getting in this new train of becoming open source and building a community behind it. What did you think at the time, or did you get any involved at the early times of the open source conversion?
My involvement mainly with the open source was for initially was just for the internal use. So we were using the same version of the platform internally versus externally. So all our legacy applications and everything we had initially written on the first version of ROXIE, we had to migrate over to the open source, which was much more standardized than the previous versions were much more customized for our internal use. So when we started open sourcing it, it was a lot more standardized. So we migrated all those applications from in the last 12 years. HPCC is progressed leaps and bounds since the day I started working to where it is now.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I feel personally that there has been this acceleration since we made open source. So many new ideas, so many new blood getting into the platform. So it doesn't look anywhere like what it was 20 years ago. It just so Ken, what have been you working on lately? I know that you have been involved a little bit with ECL Watch, right?
Actually, I've been working mainly on metrics, and hopefully those can be something that we can display as kind of a standard set in ECO Watch as we go through. But as we migrate to the cloud,
By the way, a little bit was an understatement. Yes. So can you tell us a little bit more about those metrics? What are
well,
those
yeah,
metrics for? Tell me.
that's my plan to push that into ECO Watch as part of the standard platform offering. But as we move to the cloud and things become a little bit more automated and um, I don't want to say hidden, but a lot of times when you have an on-prem bare metal installation, you can go in and see exactly what's happening. As you move to the cloud, that monitoring and that testing and those policies to scale up and scale down become very, very, very important. So I'm working on an independent sort of metric system where we can plug in different backend systems, maybe Prometheus or Elasticsearch or even Datadog, so that the platform generates the metrics and you can use whatever back system you want to use to do your scaling and even send those metrics to different places. Maybe at some point you turn on something that's going to do some application performance monitoring for some, you may have some queries that maybe don't operate as efficiently as you want them to, so you want to look a little deeper. So that's where my primary focus has been of late.
Well, so speaking about metrics, one of the challenges is always to translate some of the underlying instrumentation in the hardware or the cloud and integrate that with what comes from the analysis of the query or the work unit itself, right? Sometimes you say, well, this work unit is slow and for this query is not working as up to par in ROXIE. But then if you start doing some correlation across those two areas, you find out that the ROXIE query that is slow, it is slow because the distribution of the data is skewed in that particular key. And you end up having one node that is always being hit for no reason. Or in the work unit in Thor, you find out that you are doing a distribution by key that is not very, it has low granularity, and maybe now your process is trying to over execute this across all the nodes. So, and I'm not saying that you might consider this in your project, but is there any consideration of integrating some of the information that comes from the ECL watch side of work unit and query information, like for example, in the case of ROXIE, query statistics, with the general metrics of the system and the cloud?
The short answer to your question is yes. One of the things I've considered is what I'll term is more ephemeral, short-term metrics that might be work unit related. The primary goal here is long-term operation of the cluster and nodes as we move into the cloud world, so that you can quickly aggregate those and see when there's a problem with the cluster. But these more work unit level type metrics, which are maybe only live for a short period of time, is something that I have highly considered. And in the architecture for the metric system, to be able to take something like that and send it somewhere else, so that it doesn't fill up your main DevOps level monitoring system, but something that goes off and can be looked at down the road, or however long that is, which might be an hour or a couple of weeks, depending
Well,
on
and
history. But
yeah,
by
and
develop,
the audience is different there, right? Because one audience is the DevOps, as you said, the other one is DCL developer. That
yes,
is,
yes,
yes.
exactly. So the whole architecture of the system is designed such that you can have different audiences and different sets of metrics that you could send different places. That's
That is very
that's
cool.
that's the goal.
That is very
And I
cool.
think we're pretty close to realizing that. We do have some pieces of the framework in the most recent release for the cloud. So
very good. So Krishna, what have you been working on then lately?
My recent focus has been on the new platform, the ROXIE features, making sure the bare metal and the cloud versions are working exactly as intended, the functionality wise, the performance wise, and also focusing on the ROXIE pod startup times. How long does it take for the DALIs? Why do we have multiple lookup on the DALIs when the ROXIE is starting up? How long does it take for each ROXIE node to start up? So my focus has been mainly on the ROXIE side of the new platform.
So, and now for both of you, so how do you see our 8.0 version, which is about to be released, I think, in a couple of days? I don't know when this podcast will be released, but it might already be out there. We will have a release candidate, I think, next week. So how do you see 8.0 and 8x affecting what you're doing? Because in the case of Ken, it seems that the work you're doing is going to be at some point incorporated in this 8 series of HPCC. In the case of you, Krishna, it seems that the change to the cloud is pretty core to what you are analyzing right now, right?
You want to go first, Ken?
Oh, sure. I see that the stuff I'm working is just a critical part of a robust cloud-based application. So it is a necessity for us to be able to collect this information and be able to scale and diagnose the platform. In fact, some of what is being done by and collected from the metric subsystem as we move forward could be useful to Krishna as he looks at pod startup times and things like that. And as we become more robust in how we grow and shrink the platform while it's running in the cloud, I think these values will be instrumental in his work.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think the moving to cloud with the 8.0 is a perfect natural fit for us from where we are in the direction we have been going, from the original bare metal to fusion to now the cloud. Fusion, from my take, it is basically between your bare metal and a cloud, a bridge between those two. So
Yes.
we have been doing a partial cloud in the fusion. Now we get to go full blown on the cloud when we actually migrate over everything. So it's been a natural progress for us.
So I didn't think of it that way, but you're absolutely right. So Fusion was a sort of a static environment in a cloud-like system. And cloud just as the dynamic components of the cloud, right? The elasticity that we didn't put into place in Fusion. So that's a very good way of seeing the progression. Yeah, yeah.
Good stepping stone.
So yeah, seeing from that standpoint, as you are working on comparing the functionality and the startup times of ROXIE and other things, how do you see it shape up so far? I know that 8.0 is not released yet, but at least anything that you have been testing so far.
So far, from what we have seen with the performance and the functionality and everything, 8.0 has been really good. I mean, what we have in the old platform, the load we can put in on the test environment, it is tough to duplicate that much load on our when we are testing as a new platform on local machines. But from what the testing we have seen right now, it is what we expected. There is no degradation of any performance. Actually, the features are good. Now it's a lot more scalable and it's on demand compared to the previous, even either Fusion or bare metal, where you had to have certain number of clusters in order for us for data, irrespective of whether you needed that much TPS or not, when you have so many servers in place. With cloud, with 8.0, with the same performance and functionality being exactly the same, it is a lot more scalable and a lot more efficient right now.
That's very encouraging. That's very cool. And 8.0 is not released yet, so many of the things might even be improved by the time it's released. I know that in a conversation with Richard Chapman and Gavin and others, they indicated that there were a number of issues. Well, I wouldn't say issues. I would say probably opportunities to improve performance in the underlying system that have been lurking for a very long time. And sometimes it was hard to apply much time to those things because there were more pressing needs. But I heard from them that they said that they spend quite a bit of time now addressing those and adding and finding ways to improve performance in a number of components within both ROXIE and Thor. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out. It might be even better than expected. This is good, folks. This was a great session, and I really enjoyed it. I just don't want to make it too long. I don't want to bore the audience. So I try to stay always in the 15 or 20 minutes mark. But thank you very much. It's been fun, and thank you for the history discussion as well.
Yeah, brings back the old memories.
It does bring back old memories. So thank you, Ken. Thank you, Krishna, and
You're
happy
welcome.
anniversary, HPC Systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Flavio.
Bye-bye.